The sun came up about an hour ago. First time in 5 days, it's done that. I stood at my kitchen window and watched it like I'd never seen it before. Like I needed to make sure it was real before I trusted it. The light came over the tree line the way it always does, slow and orange and ordinary. And I stood there with my coffee going cold in my hand. I didn't move for a long time. The town is quiet, quieter than it should be, even for this early. I need to write this down before I talk myself out of believing it. The first morning, it didn't come up. Nobody panicked. I live in Carver's Mill, which sits far enough north that we're used to short days in winter. Dark by 4 in the afternoon, sun up late, the kind of place where people keep extra batteries and don't complain about the cold. So when the alarm went off and the windows were still black, most people in town assumed they'd simply woken up too early, reset the alarm, went back to sleep. I did the same thing. By 9 in the morning, with the sky still dark and the stars still out like it was midnight, the first confused posts started showing up online, not just from Carver's Mill, from the whole surrounding region. A wide stretch of small towns and rural nothing, sitting under a sky that had simply declined to do what skies do. By noon, the news was covering it. Experts, as they do, appeared quickly and spoke confidently. Solar event, atmospheric anomaly, particulate interference at an altitude that was currently being measured. It would resolve. These things happened, historically, in various parts of the world. It was being monitored. There was no cause for alarm. People nodded and turned their porch lights on and made jokes about it online. I went to bed that night with the blinds open, half expecting to wake up to normal daylight. Day 2 was the same. By day 2, the jokes had thinned out and the theories had gotten stranger. The internet was doing what it does, cycling through explanations that got less scientific by the hour. I stopped reading after a while because none of it was helping. I drove to the hardware store and bought 2 extra battery lanterns and a case of candles, not because I thought the power was going out, but because something about having them made me feel better. The hardware store was picked over already. I wasn't the only one thinking that way. That evening, I sat on my porch with a lantern and looked at the sky. The stars were brilliant, clearer than I'd ever seen them actually, with no competing daylight to wash them out. Beautiful in a way that didn't comfort me at all. I kept looking for the horizon where the sun should have been and finding nothing, just stars going all the way down to the tree line. My neighbor across the street, Darwin, was on his porch too. We waved at each other. He's the kind of man who fixes his own roof and doesn't complain about anything, which is its own kind of reassuring presence in a neighborhood. He looked steady. I felt a little better for seeing him there. I went inside and slept badly. Day 3 was when things started to shift. It's hard to explain what I mean by that without sounding like I'm dramatizing it. Nothing dramatic happened on day 3, not at first. It was more like a texture change. The way the air in a house feels different when a window you thought was closed is actually open. Something had changed in the quality of the dark, and it took me most of that morning to understand what it was. It was heavier. I know that doesn't make literal sense. Darkness isn't heavy. It's an absence, not a thing. But the dark outside my windows on day 3 had a weight to it that it hadn't had before, like it was pressing against the glass a little. Like it wasn't just the absence of light, but the presence of something else. I noticed around mid-morning that the birds were gone. We have a feeder in the backyard. I fill it every few days, and there are usually chickadees and sparrows working it from first light to last. I hadn't heard any of them since day 2, but I'd assumed they were confused by the dark, roosting, waiting it out. On day 3, I went out back and the feeder was untouched, full from 2 days ago, and there were no birds anywhere, not in the yard, not in the trees, not in the sky. No sound of them, no wings. And it wasn't just birds. The neighborhood that usually had at least one dog barking somewhere had gone completely silent. Not hiding silent, gone silent. I was standing in my backyard thinking about that when Darwin knocked on my fence gate. I let him in. He stood in my yard and looked around the way a man looks when he's checking to make sure he's not being overheard. He said there was something in his backyard the night before. He'd heard a sound around 2 in the morning, a low sound he couldn't place, and he'd looked out the back window. Couldn't see anything in the dark. Went out with a flashlight in the morning, and there was a section of his lawn, maybe 6 feet across, where the grass was black. Not burned, not dead from cold. Black and desiccated, like something had pulled everything out of it, dry down to the dirt. We stood there for a minute without saying anything. He went back to his house. I went back to mine. I locked the back door, which I almost never do. The cars started leaving on day 4. I watched them from my front window through the morning. Families mostly, packed up, heading for the highway south. I didn't blame them. I thought about it myself. I had a sister 2 states over, normal daylight, normal everything. The idea of just driving toward that felt like drinking water after being thirsty for days. But I waited. I'm not sure why. Something kept me from packing the car. By the afternoon, some of those cars came back. Not all of them. Some didn't come back, and I have to assume they made it out, and I'm glad for them. But maybe a third of the ones that had left that morning came trickling back through town over the course of a few hours. They parked, the people got out, and they were fine, physically. They walked normally, and they went inside their houses without incident. But I watched a woman named Pell, who lives 2 doors down, get out of her car and walk to her front door, and something was wrong with the way she moved. Not a limp, not an injury, just wrong. Like the timing was slightly off, like the person inside her body was operating her from somewhere unfamiliar and still getting used to the controls. I didn't go outside to talk to her. An hour later, my friend Seela called me. She'd tried to leave that morning and come back. She sounded like herself on the phone, mostly. She told me the highway south just stopped. Not a roadblock, not a detour. She said she was driving in the dark with her headlights on and the road was there, and then it wasn't, just darkness in all directions, and she'd turned around because there was nowhere else to go. I asked her if she was okay. She said she was fine, said it quickly. Then she said she was going to get some sleep and hung up. I haven't talked to her since. That evening, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I drove to the edge of town on the South Road, not far, just to see. I stopped where the last streetlight stood and looked ahead. My headlights cut into the dark and showed me road for maybe 200 feet, and then nothing. Not a wall, not a fog, just nothing. The beam went out and didn't land on anything, like the light was going somewhere it couldn't come back from. I sat there for a while. The car felt very small. On the way back through town, I noticed something else. I could see the sky from Millard County to the east. Faint, but visible. A glow on the horizon, the kind a town makes at night. Normal darkness, normal stars. The towns around us weren't in this. Whatever this was, it was sitting over Carver's Mill specifically, and the edges of it were sharp enough that you could stand at the town limit and be in two different skies at once. This didn't come here by accident. I went home and locked every door. Day 5. I was up early because I hadn't slept much. I made coffee and stood at my kitchen window, and that's when I saw them. People in the street. Darwin was there. Pell was there. 8 or 10 others I recognized, standing in the road in the dark. No flashlights, no phones out, just standing in a loose group facing north, completely still. Not talking, not looking at each other. I watched them for a long time from inside. None of them moved. They weren't distressed. They weren't confused looking. They were just there, the way furniture is just there, occupying space, facing the same direction. I thought about going out to check on Darwin. I didn't. Around mid-morning, I felt it for the first time. I was sitting on the couch, and it came on slow, like warmth from a vent you didn't notice until you were already comfortable. A pull toward the front door, low and easy and not threatening at all. Nothing in it that said danger. It felt like the opposite of danger, actually. Like outside there was something that would make everything make sense. Something patient and large and not unkind, just waiting for me to come see. It was the most frightening thing I've ever felt, because it was convincing. Because some part of me wanted to stand up and walk to that door and open it and just go. And that part of me had a very good argument. And I had to sit there and deliberately not listen to it for a long time. I went upstairs instead, away from the door. I sat on the floor of my bedroom and I looked out the upstairs window at the sky, and I saw what the darkness was. I don't have the right words for it. I want to be honest about that up front, because I've tried to find them since, and I can't. What I saw wasn't a shape. It wasn't a creature. It was more like an understanding that arrived all at once, looking at the sky, the way you can suddenly understand a word you've heard 100 times the moment someone uses it correctly. The darkness wasn't dark. It was shadow. Something was standing over the town that was so large, so incomprehensibly large, that the shadow it cast covered every inch of us. The sun wasn't gone. The sun was still there, the same as always, rising and setting on the same schedule. We just weren't in the light anymore. We were in the space underneath something that had stopped here and hadn't moved on yet. And it was feeding, not violently, not hungrily the way an animal feeds, more like the way sunlight feeds a field, passively, just by being there. The thing standing over us was drawing something up out of the town the way heat draws moisture off the ground, and the people standing in the street had opened themselves to it, and now they were dry. like Darwin's grass, like the birds. Just empty, just left behind. I pressed myself against the wall under the window, and I didn't move. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point, I fell asleep on the floor, which I didn't think was possible. But fear exhausts you eventually, and my body just quit. When I woke up, there was light under the door. Real light. Morning light. Thin and gold, coming through the gap at the bottom of my bedroom door from the hallway window. I got up and I opened the door, and the hallway was full of it. I went to the window. Sunrise. Ordinary and slow and completely real. I stood there until I was sure. Then I went downstairs and outside. The people who'd been in the street were gone. Not collapsed, not scattered, just absent, like they'd never been there. The road was empty and the town was quiet, and the air smelled like it always does after a long, dark stretch of weather, clean and a little cold. Normal. I walked to the middle of the road and turned north. Nothing there. Just the tree line and the sky getting lighter by the minute. I looked at Darwin's house. Door closed, car in the driveway. No lights on inside. I haven't knocked. I don't know that I will. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. On day 5, when I felt that pull toward the door, I was maybe 30 seconds from standing up. It wasn't a hard resistance. It wasn't willpower. I just happened to go upstairs instead of to the door. And I don't know that there was anything noble or smart about that decision. I was scared, and I moved away from the fear the wrong direction, and it turned out to be the right one. The light this morning felt thin. I don't know how else to put it. Sunlight through a kitchen window after 5 days of nothing should have felt like relief, and it did, partly. But underneath the relief, it felt the way light feels in a room where something large was just standing and has stepped away. Thinner for what was blocking it. Changed a little by the fact of it. I keep looking north. I don't know why. I think whatever it was, it got what it came for. I think it stood over this town and fed until it had enough, and then it moved on, the same way a cloud moves on, the same way any large, slow thing moves when it's finished. I think most of the people who came back from the highway had already let it in before they got home, and the ones standing in the street had been doing what it needed them to do, and when it finally lifted and moved on, they just weren't there anymore. Not dead. I want to be careful about that. I don't think they're dead. I just think they're empty. Whatever made them themselves, whatever it was, drawing up slowly over 5 days, the way you draw water up through a straw, that's somewhere else now. Somewhere very far above us and moving. What it left in the street doesn't need to be there anymore because there's nothing in it that needs anything. I'm trying not to think about Selah. I should leave Carver's Mill. I know that. I've been telling myself that all morning while the light comes up and the town stays quiet and the birds don't come back to the feeder. I'll pack a bag today, drive south, find out where the road starts being a road again. I'll do that today. I just need to stop looking north first.